When a billionaire CEO stands outside your door at midnight, trembling and vulnerable, you know your carefully controlled life is about to shatter. Lucas Grant had spent 5 years building walls around his heart, walls meant to protect his daughter, his stability, everything he'd fought to create as a single father. But Victoria Hale didn't knock on those walls. She walked straight through them. What happened that night would change everything. A choice between empire and love, between power and truth, between the life she'd built and the life she desperately wanted. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and comment your city below so I can see how far this journey travels. Because what you're about to hear is about risking everything for something real. The fluorescent lights of Hale Industries' 42nd floor had long since been dimmed for the night. Only a handful remained illuminated, those belonging to the offices where ambition outweighed exhaustion, where tomorrow's deals couldn't wait for tomorrow's sunrise. Lucas Grant's desk lamp cast a warm pool of light across the financial projections spread before him, numbers that would have made most people's eyes glaze over, but that told him stories. Stories of risk and reward, of carefully calculated futures, of the razor-thin margins between success and catastrophic failure. He understood those margins intimately. He'd been living on one for the past 5 years. "You're still here." The voice cut through the silence like a blade through silk, smooth, controlled, and carrying an undertone of something Lucas had learned not to examine too closely. He didn't need to look up to know who stood in his doorway. He'd memorized the cadence of those footsteps weeks ago, the particular rhythm of her heels against marble, the way she paused just slightly before entering a room, as if giving the space itself permission to accommodate her presence. Victoria Hale, CEO, billionaire. The woman whose signature could move markets and whose decisions shaped the futures of thousands. And lately, the woman who made Lucas forget to breathe when she walked into a room. "Just finishing the Hendricks analysis," Lucas replied, keeping his eyes on the spreadsheet even though every cell of data had blurred into meaningless pixels. "Wanted to have it ready for your morning briefing." "It's 11:30, Lucas." The sound of his name in her voice did something dangerous to his carefully maintained composure. He finally looked up. She stood framed in the doorway, her tailored charcoal suit somehow still immaculate despite the late hour, not a strand of her dark hair out of place. But there was something in her eyes, a weariness that her perfect posture couldn't quite hide, a weight that no amount of power or money could lift. "It's 11:30 for you too," he countered gently. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Touché." She moved into his office with that same fluid grace he'd noticed the first day he'd started working here 6 months ago. 6 months that felt like both an eternity and the blink of an eye. 6 months of learning to navigate the impossible space between professional distance and the magnetic pull that seemed to exist in every room they shared. "Emily's with her grandmother tonight?" Victoria asked, settling into the chair across from his desk, with the kind of elegant economy of movement that came from a lifetime of boardrooms and galas. The question itself was simple, casual even, but the fact that she remembered his daughter's name, that she tracked the nights when his 7-year-old stayed with his ex-wife's mother, that she paid attention to the small details of his carefully compartmentalized life, that meant something. Something Lucas told himself not to think about during business hours. Or ever, really. "Yeah," he said, allowing himself a small smile. "Which means I actually got to stay late without guilt for once." She's probably already convinced her grandmother to let her watch one more episode of whatever animated series is currently dominating her entire personality. Victoria's laugh was quiet, genuine, and it transformed her face in ways that reminded Lucas why this was dangerous. When she laughed like that, she wasn't the untouchable CEO worth billions. She was just a woman. A woman with intelligence that challenged him, with a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard, with a loneliness in her eyes that she thought she hid better than she did. "I remember those days," she said softly, and something in her tone made Lucas pause. "You have—" "No." The word came quickly, a door closing. "No, I have nephews. My brother's kids. Before he passed, I used to watch them sometimes." She looked away, her fingers absently adjusting the already perfect cuff of her sleeve. "That was a long time ago." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with the weight of things neither of them knew how to say. Lucas had learned fragments of Victoria Hale's story over the months, not from her, but from the careful reading between the lines of business profiles and the occasional unguarded moment like this one. An empire built from the ashes of family tragedy. A brother lost too young. Parents who'd never recovered from the loss of their son, leaving their daughter to transform grief into ambition, pain into power. She'd taken her family's modest tech company and turned it into a global conglomerate worth billions. She'd done it alone. And somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten how not to be alone. Or maybe she'd never learned in the first place. The Hendricks analysis looks solid, Lucas said, steering them back to safer waters. But there's a risk factor in their Asian markets that I think we should discuss before you move forward with the acquisition. Victoria's eyes sharpened, the vulnerability vanishing behind the armor of executive focus. Show me. This was familiar ground. This was safe. Lucas turned his laptop screen toward her and began walking through the data, pointing out the patterns he'd noticed, the correlations that suggested potential instability in supply chains, the geopolitical factors that could turn a profitable acquisition into a costly mistake. She leaned forward, studying the numbers with the kind of intensity that had made her legendary in business circles. Her perfume, something subtle and expensive that Lucas had never been able to identify, drifted across the desk. He forced himself to focus on the spreadsheet. Here, he said, highlighting a column. Their third quarter margins look strong, but if you cross-reference with the currency fluctuations in these markets and factor in the new trade regulations, the profit window closes, Victoria finished, her eyes still fixed on the screen. It's a short-term play disguised as long-term growth. Exactly. She sat back, her expression thoughtful. Hendricks has been pushing for a quick decision. Now I know why. She met his eyes, and something flickered in her gaze, respect, appreciation, and something else that made Lucas's heart rate spike. How did you catch this? Their own analysts missed it. Lucas shrugged, uncomfortable with the direct praise. I look at numbers differently, I guess. When you're raising a kid on a single income, you learn to see the risks everyone else misses. You learn to plan for the worst-case scenarios. You learn to survive, Victoria said quietly. Yeah, Lucas agreed, his throat suddenly tight. You learn to survive. Their eyes held for a moment too long. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with all the things they didn't say, couldn't say, shouldn't even think. Victoria broke the gaze first, standing abruptly. It's late. You should go home. Get some rest. You should too. I will. But they both knew she was lying. She'd stay here for another 2 hours at least, working through emails, reviewing proposals, building her empire one sleepless night at a time. Lucas had seen the pattern enough to recognize it. She moved toward the door, then paused. When she turned back, the CEO mask had slipped just slightly, revealing something raw beneath. Lucas? Yeah. Thank you for seeing what others don't, for being thorough, for... She trailed off, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since he'd known her. For staying late. The subtext hung between them like smoke, visible but intangible, impossible to grasp but undeniably present. Anytime, Lucas said, and meant it in ways that terrified him. After she left, he sat in the quiet office for another 20 minutes, staring at the financial projections without seeing them. His phone buzzed, a text from his ex-wife's mother with a photo of Emily asleep on the couch, still in her clothes, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. The caption read, "Too excited about tomorrow's zoo trip to make it to bed. She's fine. Sleep well." Lucas smiled, saving the photo. Emily was his anchor, his purpose, the reason he'd rebuilt his life from the ground up after the divorce. Every decision he made was filtered through one question. Is this good for Emily? And getting involved with his boss, even if she was brilliant and lonely and made him feel things he thought he'd never feel again, that wasn't good for Emily. It wasn't good for his career. It wasn't good for the stability he'd fought so hard to create. So why couldn't he stop thinking about the look in Victoria's eyes when she'd thanked him for staying late? The next morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that made New York City feel almost manageable. Lucas dropped Emily off at school, her excited chatter about the upcoming zoo trip filling the car with an infectious energy that carried him through the subway commute, and into the gleaming tower that housed Hale Industries. The office buzzed with its usual controlled chaos, assistants coordinating schedules, analysts hunched over terminals, executives moving through the halls with purpose-driven strides. Lucas had learned to read the building's moods, to sense when a major deal was closing or when tensions were running high. Today felt different. There was an electric current running through the 42nd floor, a barely suppressed excitement that people were trying to contain behind professional facades. "Did you hear?" Marcus Chen, one of the senior analysts, caught Lucas by the elevator. "Victoria's being courted for the Maxim Corp merger. It's huge, man. We're talking about a potential expansion into 17 new markets." Lucas's stomach tightened. "I hadn't heard. She's in meetings all morning with the Maxim team. If this goes through," Marcus whistled low, "this company will double in size, maybe triple. It's legacy-defining stuff." "Yeah," Lucas said, forcing neutrality into his voice. "Sounds big." He made his way to his desk, trying to ignore the way his mind immediately went to last night, to Victoria standing in his office, looking tired and vulnerable. Had she known about this then? Was that why she'd seemed so... He cut the thought off. It didn't matter. This was her world. Mergers and acquisitions, billion-dollar deals, empire-building decisions. He was just an analyst who happened to be good with numbers and happened to work late sometimes. The morning passed in a blur of routine tasks, but Lucas couldn't shake the awareness of the closed-door meetings happening in the executive suite. He told himself it was professional curiosity. He told himself he cared because major corporate changes would affect his job, his stability, Emily's future. He told himself a lot of things he didn't quite believe. It was nearly 2 o'clock when his desk phone rang. Not his cell, but the direct office line that almost never lit up. "Lucas Grant," he answered. "Mr. Grant, this is Diane from Miss Hale's office. She's requested your presence in conference room A, immediately if possible." His heart kicked into a higher gear. "Of course. I'll be right there." Conference room A was where the big deals happened, where futures were negotiated and fortunes made or lost. Lucas had only been inside twice before, both times to present data to visiting investors. As he rode the elevator up 2 floors, he tried to prepare himself for whatever this was. Professional. Keep it professional. The conference room doors were heavy glass and steel, designed to impress and intimidate. Through them, Lucas could see Victoria seated at the head of a long table, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits he didn't recognize, and her chief legal counsel, Patricia Morrison. Victoria's executive assistant opened the door for him. "Mr. Grant, thank you for joining us," Victoria said, her voice carrying that perfect blend of authority and courtesy that made people want to impress her. "Gentlemen, this is Lucas Grant, one of our senior financial analysts." The 2 men, both in their 50s, both radiating the kind of confidence that came from too many successful deals, sized him up with barely concealed skepticism. Lucas was used to it. At 32, he looked younger than his years, and his background didn't include the Ivy League pedigree that usually populated rooms like this. "Mr. Grant," Victoria continued, "these are James Rothman and David Chen from Maxim Corp. We've been discussing a potential merger that would significantly expand Hale Industries' global footprint." "I've heard," Lucas said carefully. "It sounds like an exciting opportunity." "Exciting and complex," Victoria replied, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that felt deliberately communicative, as if she were trying to tell him something beyond her words. "Which is why I wanted you here. James and David have presented some fascinating projections for the Asian and European markets. I'd like your assessment." One of the men, Rothman, frowned slightly. "Ms. Hale, with all due respect, we've had these numbers vetted by 3 different consulting firms. I'm sure, Victoria interrupted smoothly. "Mr. Grant has a particular talent for seeing risks that others miss. Indulge me." The words echoed last night's conversation so precisely that Lucas felt heat rise in his chest. She remembered. Of course she remembered. Victoria Hale forgot nothing. For the next 45 minutes, Lucas pored over the Maxim projections, asking questions, cross-referencing data, building a picture in his mind of what this merger would actually mean. The numbers were impressive, spectacular even. Market penetration strategies that looked flawless, revenue projections that would make any CEO salivate. But something nagged at him. A pattern in the supply chain data that didn't quite align. A series of regional contracts that seemed too good to be true. These supplier agreements, Lucas said finally, looking up from the tablet he'd been studying, the ones Maxime has locked in for the next 5 years in Southeast Asia. Can you tell me more about the vendors? The Maxim executives exchanged a glance. Standard regional partnerships, Chen said dismissively. We've worked with them for years. Very reliable. I'm sure they are, Lucas said evenly. But 3 of these companies are based in regions with upcoming regulatory changes that will likely require significant compliance upgrades. Upgrades that these particular vendors are reportedly not prepared to implement. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. What are you suggesting? Rothman asked, his tone cooling several degrees. I'm suggesting that these contracts might not be as stable as they appear. If these vendors can't meet the new regulatory standards, and the intelligence reports I'm seeing suggest they can't, then Maxime will need to find new suppliers at significantly higher costs. Costs that would eat into these profit margins by, Lucas did the mental math quickly, approximately 30 to 40%. Victoria leaned forward slightly, her expression unreadable but her eyes absolutely focused. And where did you find this intelligence? Trade publications mostly, some advocacy group reports, public record stuff that's easy to miss if you're not looking for it. Lucas met her gaze steadily. But it's there. Another long silence. This time, it was Chen who broke it. We'll need to verify this information, obviously. Obviously, Victoria agreed, but if Mr. Grant's assessment is correct, and in my experience it usually is, then we need to recalculate the entire financial foundation of this merger. The timeline we discussed would need to be significantly extended while due diligence is properly completed. Rothman's jaw tightened. Ms. Hale, we have other parties interested in this merger. We can't simply pause negotiations indefinitely while we chase down what might be a minor compliance issue. If it's minor, verification should be quick, Victoria said, her voice hardening into the tone that had made her famous in negotiation circles. Pleasant, reasonable, and absolutely immovable. And if it's not minor, then we both need to know before we proceed, wouldn't you agree? The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, but the energy had shifted. What had started as a celebration of near-certain success had become a tense recalibration of expectations. By the time the Maxim executives left, with tight smiles and promises to follow up shortly, Lucas could feel the weight of what had just happened settling over the room. Patricia Morrison packed up her files with brisk efficiency. I'll have our team start independent verification immediately. Lucas, I'll need copies of those trade publications you referenced. I'll send them over within the hour. Good. She paused at the door, glancing back at Victoria. Smart call, bringing him in. That could have been ugly down the line. After she left, Lucas found himself alone with Victoria for the first time since last night. The conference room suddenly felt smaller, more intimate despite its size. You just killed $1 billion deal, Lucas said quietly. I postponed it. There's a difference. Victoria stood, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. Maybe it'll survive proper scrutiny. Maybe it won't. Either way, we'll know the truth before I bet this company's future on it. Lucas joined her at the window, maintaining a careful distance. The Maxim guys looked pretty unhappy. They'll get over it, or they won't. I'm not in the business of making decisions based on other people's happiness. She turned to look at him, and the CEO mask had slipped again, revealing that same vulnerability he'd glimpsed last night. Thank you, again, for seeing what I missed. You wouldn't have missed it if you'd had time to dig deeper. You just I needed someone who looks at the world the way you do, Victoria interrupted. Someone who understands risk because they've lived it. Someone who, she trailed off, seeming to catch herself. Someone good at their job. But that wasn't what she'd been about to say. Lucas knew it with the same certainty he'd known the Maxim numbers didn't add up. Victoria. The use of her first name seemed to startle them both. In the office, it was always Ms. Hale, always professional, always appropriate. The slip felt monumental. I should get back to my desk, Lucas said quickly, breaking the spell. I've got the Morrison Quarterly Review to finish. Right, yes. Victoria's composure snapped back into place like armor. Of course. Thank you for your time, Mr. Grant. Mr. Grant. Back to formal. Back to safe. Lucas was halfway to the door when her voice stopped him. Lucas? He turned. She stood silhouetted against the New York skyline, powerful and alone, and for a moment she looked unbearably lonely. "Emily's zoo trip is tomorrow, isn't it?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Yeah, how did you—" "You mentioned it, last night, in passing." A small smile touched her lips. "I hope she has a wonderful time." There was something in the way she said it, a wistfulness, a longing for simple joys she'd never allowed herself, that made Lucas's chest ache. "I'll tell her Ms. Hale said hello," he said softly. "I'd like that." The rest of the week passed in a blur of verification meetings and revised projections. The Maxim deal wasn't dead, but it had been fundamentally transformed. Lucas's analysis had been correct. The supplier contracts were a house of cards waiting to collapse. With proper due diligence, the merger timeline had extended from 3 months to potentially a year, with significant renegotiations required. The Maxim executives were furious. Victoria was unmoved. "Better to know now than after we've signed contracts," she told her executive team in a Friday afternoon meeting Lucas attended remotely. "If this deal is solid, it'll survive scrutiny. If it's not, I'd rather walk away now than clean up the mess later." Lucas listened from his desk, impressed as always by her clarity, her willingness to walk away from billions if the foundation wasn't solid. It was the kind of long-term thinking that had built her empire. It was also, he was beginning to understand, the kind of thinking that had left her isolated at the top. His phone buzzed with a text from Emily's grandmother. "Zoo was amazing. She made me take 47 pictures of penguins. 47! She wants to tell you all about it tonight." Dropping her off at 6. Lucas smiled, checking his watch. 4:30. If he left now, he could beat rush hour and actually spend a real evening with his daughter instead of arriving home exhausted and distracted. He was packing up his laptop when his office phone rang. Lucas Grant. "Hi, it's Diane. Ms. Hale was wondering if you had a moment to stop by her office before you leave." His heart did that annoying thing it had been doing all week, the skip, the acceleration, the reminder that he was in dangerous territory. "Sure, I'll head up now." Victoria's executive suite occupied a corner of the 44th floor, all glass and steel and minimalist elegance. Her assistant's desk sat outside like a guardian's post, but Diane waved him through with a knowing smile that made Lucas wonder exactly what she suspected. Victoria stood at her desk, reviewing something on her computer, but looked up when he entered. She'd removed her suit jacket, and her white silk blouse looked somehow more intimate than formal evening wear would have. "You wanted to see me?" "I did." She gestured to the sitting area by the window, 2 leather chairs and a low table that suggested casual conversations rather than executive decisions. "Have a seat. This won't take long. I know you have Emily tonight." Of course she knew. She knew everything. Lucas sat, hyper-aware of the way the evening light caught her features, the slight shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "I wanted to talk to you about the Maxim situation," Victoria began, settling into the chair across from him. "Your analysis this week has been invaluable. The board is impressed. I'm impressed. Just doing my job. You're doing much more than your job, and we both know it." She paused, seeming to choose her next words carefully. "I'm recommending you for a promotion. Senior Vice President of Strategic Analysis. It comes with a significant salary increase, better benefits, and a seat in high-level strategic meetings." Lucas's mind reeled. SVP was 3 levels above his current position. It was the kind of jump that usually took years, not months. "Victoria, that's incredibly generous, but it's not generous. It's earned." Her eyes held his with fierce intensity. "You've saved this company from at least 2 potentially disastrous decisions in the past month alone. You see things others don't. You think differently. That's valuable. Extremely valuable." "I appreciate that. I really do. But—" Lucas struggled to articulate the knot of anxiety in his chest. "People will talk. They'll say I only got promoted because—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Because of what? The late nights in the office? The way she looked at him sometimes? The magnetic pull neither of them acknowledged but both undeniably felt? "Because I recognize talent when I see it," Victoria finished, one eyebrow raised. "Let them talk. I didn't build this company by worrying about gossip." You built it by being above reproach, Lucas countered. Your reputation is flawless. I don't want to be the thing that tarnishes it. Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or appreciation. You're worried about my reputation? Of course I am. You've worked too hard to have people question your decisions based on, he gestured helplessly between them, based on assumptions. Assumptions about what, exactly? The question hung in the air, charged and dangerous. They were treading into territory they'd both been avoiding, dancing around the edges of acknowledgement. Lucas stood, needing distance. I should go. Emily will be home soon, and I promised her we'd talk about her zoo trip before dinner. Lucas. Victoria stood too, closing some of the space between them. What are you afraid of? Everything, he admitted, the honesty escaping before he could stop it. I'm afraid of making the wrong decision, of putting my daughter's stability at risk, of... He met her eyes, letting her see the truth he'd been hiding. Of this. This, she repeated softly. You mean the fact that when you walk into a room, I forget what I was thinking about? The fact that I find excuses to need your analysis just so I can talk to you? The fact that I know your daughter's schedule better than my own because I pay attention to every word you say? Lucas's breath caught. Victoria sobbed. Or maybe you mean the fact that you stay late on nights when Emily is with her grandmother, even though you have no reason to. That you bring me coffee exactly the way I like it, without me ever having to ask. That you look at me sometimes like I'm not just the CEO, but... She stopped, vulnerability cracking through her composure. But like I'm just... me. The admission hung between them, irrevocable and terrifying. I can't, Lucas said, his voice rough. I can't be the person who complicates your life, who becomes the reason people question your judgment. I can't risk my stability, my daughter's future, for something that could destroy everything we've both built. And if I told you I've been thinking the same thing for months, Victoria asked, that I lie awake at night running scenarios, calculating risks, trying to figure out how this could possibly work, that I've never wanted something more and never been more terrified of it at the same time? Lucas closed his eyes, fighting against the surge of feeling her words unleashed. Then I'd say you're right to be terrified. Because I am. Because this isn't just about us. I have a 7-year-old daughter who depends on me, who needs stability and certainty, and a father who makes smart, careful decisions. And getting involved with me wouldn't be smart. No, Lucas said quietly. It would be reckless, dangerous, potentially catastrophic for both of us. So what do we do? The question was simple. The answer should have been too. Stay professional, maintain distance, forget this conversation ever happened. But when Lucas opened his eyes and found Victoria looking at him with the same longing and fear he felt, the answer didn't feel simple at all. I don't know, he admitted. I don't know. His phone buzzed, a text from Emily's grandmother. Running 15 minutes late. Traffic is terrible. Sorry. The interruption broke the spell. Lucas stepped back, grabbing his laptop bag. I need to go. I know. We should keep things professional, maintain appropriate boundaries. We should, Victoria agreed. Neither of them moved. Thank you, Lucas finally said. For the promotion offer. For being honest. I'll think about it. Take your time. It's not going anywhere. But they both knew she wasn't just talking about the promotion. Lucas made it to the elevator before he realized his hands were shaking. Made it to the lobby before he could breathe properly. Made it halfway home before he allowed himself to think about what had just happened. Victoria Hale had just admitted, in barely veiled terms, that she felt the same impossible pull he'd been fighting for months. The most powerful woman in the building, possibly in the city, had stood in her office looking vulnerable and uncertain and heartbreakingly human. And he'd walked away. Because he was a father first. Because he understood consequences. Because Emily deserved a stable home more than he deserved to explore whatever this feeling was. His daughter greeted him at the door with her usual explosive energy, launching into a detailed description of every animal she'd seen, every fact she'd learned, every moment of her perfect day. Lucas listened, asked questions, laughed at her impressions of the sea lions, and tried not to think about the expression on Victoria's face when he'd left. Later, after Emily was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Lucas stood at his kitchen window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, in a penthouse or office or wherever she spent her lonely evenings, Victoria was probably doing the same thing. Probably running the same calculations, weighing the same risks, fighting the same battle between what she wanted and what was wise. The smart thing would be to accept the promotion, maintain professional distance, and let whatever this was between them fade into might-have-beens. The smart thing would be to protect everything he'd built. But as Lucas stared at the city that held both his daughter's future and Victoria's presence, he couldn't shake the feeling that the smart thing and the right thing might not be the same. And he had no idea what to do about that. The weekend passed in a blur of routine. Saturday morning cartoons with Emily, grocery shopping, a birthday party for one of her classmates where Lucas stood among other parents making small talk about school projects and weekend plans. Normal life. Safe life. The kind of life he'd fought to build after his divorce had shattered everything he'd thought was stable. But Monday morning arrived with the weight of unfinished conversations, and Lucas found himself standing in front of his bathroom mirror longer than usual, adjusting his tie 3 times before finally leaving it slightly askew. Emily noticed at breakfast. "Daddy, your tie is crooked," she said around a mouthful of cereal. "Is it?" Lucas reached up to fix it, then stopped. "Maybe I like it crooked." Emily giggled, the sound bright and uncomplicated. "You're silly." "Yeah," Lucas agreed, kissing the top of her head. "I am." The subway ride to Hale Industries felt different somehow, as if Friday's conversation had altered the molecular structure of the air itself. Lucas had spent the entire weekend replaying Victoria's words, the look in her eyes, the admission that had changed everything while changing nothing at all. "When you walk into a room, I forget what I was thinking about." He tried to convince himself he'd misheard, misunderstood, misread the entire situation. But Victoria Hale didn't say things she didn't mean. She was too precise, too controlled, too aware of the weight her words carried. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor took exactly 93 seconds. Lucas had timed it once during his first week when everything about this job had felt surreal and temporary. 6 months later, it still felt surreal, just for different reasons now. Marcus was already at his desk, surrounded by coffee cups in various stages of consumption. "There you are. Thought maybe you'd bailed on us for somewhere more exciting." "More exciting than quarterly projections?" "Impossible," Lucas said, settling into his chair and waking his computer. "Victoria's looking for you, by the way. Diane called down about 20 minutes ago." Lucas's pulse jumped. "Did she say what about?" "Nope. Just that Ms. Hale wanted to see you when you got in." Marcus grinned. "You're not in trouble, are you? Because if the golden boy is in trouble, the rest of us are screwed." "I'm not the golden boy." "Dude, you killed $1 billion merger and got a promotion out of it. That's pretty golden." Lucas hadn't accepted the SVP position yet, hadn't even responded to the formal offer that had appeared in his inbox Friday evening. He'd opened the email a dozen times over the weekend, read through the details. The salary that would change Emily's life, the responsibilities that would challenge him, the office 3 floors up that came with the title. And every time he'd closed it without responding. "I'll head up now," Lucas said, grabbing his phone. The executive suite felt different on a Monday morning, busier, more energetic, full of assistants coordinating meetings and executives comparing weekend stories. Diane looked up from her desk with a knowing smile that made Lucas wonder, not for the first time, exactly how much Victoria's assistant saw and understood. "Go on in. She's expecting you." Victoria stood at the windows of her office, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing as she spoke. She looked every inch the CEO this morning. Navy suit, perfectly tailored, hair pulled back in a sleek bun, posture radiating authority. But when she turned and saw him, something in her expression softened before she caught herself. She held up one finger. "Give me a minute." And Lucas nodded, taking a seat in one of the chairs across from her desk. "I understand your concerns, Richard, but the timeline is non-negotiable," Victoria was saying, her tone pleasant but immovable. "If Maxime wants to proceed, they need to provide the updated supplier contracts by Friday. Otherwise, we'll assume they're not serious about addressing the compliance issues." "Exactly. Yes, I'll have my team ready to review as soon as they arrive. Thank you." She ended the call and set her phone down with deliberate precision. For a moment, she just looked at Lucas, and the silence stretched between them like a held breath. "Good morning," she said finally. "Morning. How was your weekend?" The question was casual, conversational, but Lucas heard the subtext clearly. Did you spend the entire weekend thinking about Friday? Did you lie awake running scenarios? Did you feel the same impossible pull I felt? Good, Lucas said. Emily had a great time at the zoo. Apparently, penguins are now her favorite animal. Before that, it was dolphins. Before that, elephants. Her favorites change weekly. Victoria smiled, the expression genuine and a little wistful. That must be wonderful, seeing the world through her eyes. Everything new and fascinating. It is, Lucas agreed softly. It reminds me not to take things for granted. The weight of his words seemed to settle over them both. Victoria moved to her desk but didn't sit, instead bracing her hands against the edge as if needing the support. I owe you an apology, she said, for Friday. I put you in an uncomfortable position. It was inappropriate. Victoria, please let me finish. She took a breath, and Lucas could see the effort it took for her to maintain composure. I've spent this entire company's history maintaining clear boundaries, professional relationships, appropriate distances. I don't blur lines. But with you, I've been blurring them for months, and Friday, I crossed one completely. That wasn't fair to you. Lucas stood, needing to be on equal ground with her. You didn't cross anything I wasn't already standing on. Her eyes met his, searching. What does that mean? It means I've been thinking the same things, feeling the same things, fighting the same battles. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with his own inability to articulate something so complicated. I've been telling myself it's one-sided, that I'm imagining the tension, that you're just being professional, and I'm reading too much into late-night conversations. But Friday, when you said, when I admitted I notice everything about you, Victoria finished quietly, when I made it impossible for you to pretend anymore. Yeah. They stood on opposite sides of her desk, the polished wood surface acting as both barrier and bridge. The morning light streaming through the windows illuminated dust motes floating between them, tiny particles suspended in space, not falling, but not quite flying either. I didn't sleep this weekend, Victoria admitted. I kept running scenarios, trying to find one where this works, where it wouldn't be complicated. Did you find one? No. The word was barely a whisper. Every scenario ends in complications, gossip, HR concerns, power dynamics, your career, your daughter's stability, my reputation. There's no clean path forward. Lucas felt something in his chest tighten. So what do we do? Victoria's expression hardened slightly, the CEO mask sliding back into place. We be smart. We maintain professional boundaries. We focus on work. She trailed off, as if even she didn't believe what she was saying. We pretend Friday never happened, Lucas finished. Would that be so terrible? Honestly, I don't know. Lucas moved around the desk, closing some of the distance between them. Not touching, but close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to notice the barely perceptible tremor in her hands. But I know I can't pretend I don't feel this. Whatever this is, I've tried. For months I've tried. It doesn't go away. Lucas, you have a daughter, responsibilities, a life you've carefully built. I won't be the reason that falls apart. And what about your life? Lucas asked. When was the last time you did something that wasn't calculated? That wasn't about the company or the bottom line or building your empire? The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. That's not fair. Isn't it? You work 18-hour days. You're here before anyone arrives and leave after everyone's gone. When do you live, Victoria? When do you let yourself want something just because you want it? I want this company to succeed. I'm not talking about the company, Lucas interrupted gently. I'm talking about you. When do you get to want something for yourself? Victoria turned away, her shoulders tense. I can't afford to want things for myself. I learned that a long time ago. The pain in her voice made Lucas's chest ache. He'd learned pieces of her story. The brother who died, the parents who'd retreated into grief, the young woman who'd taken a struggling company and transformed it into an empire because building something was easier than feeling everything she'd lost. Your brother, Lucas said softly. What was his name? She stiffened. Why are you asking me that? Because in 6 months I've heard you talk about market shares and acquisition strategies and quarterly projections, but I've never heard you talk about him. And I think maybe you should. This isn't therapy, Lucas. No, it's two people having an honest conversation. So tell me, what was his name? The silence stretched so long Lucas thought she wouldn't answer, but then so quietly he almost missed it. Daniel, tell me about him. Lucas, please. Victoria's shoulders sagged slightly, some of the rigid control bleeding out of her posture. He was 3 years older than me. Brilliant. Funny. He used to drive our parents crazy with his ideas, always pushing boundaries, always wanting to try something new. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. He's the one who convinced our father to take the company into tech integration. Everyone thought it was too risky, but Daniel saw the future. He was right. What happened? Car accident. Some drunk driver ran a red light on a Tuesday afternoon. Daniel was 28, had his whole life ahead of him. Her voice had gone flat, emotionless, the way people sound when they've told a story too many times. My parents never recovered. They went through the motions, but they were hollow. So I stepped up, took over the company, made Daniel's vision real, built something that would honor what he'd started. And somewhere along the way, you forgot how to be anything except the CEO, Lucas said gently. Victoria turned back to face him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I didn't forget. I chose. Because building something was easier than feeling everything I'd lost. Because success was measurable and grief wasn't. Because I could control a company, but I couldn't control anything else. Lucas took another step closer, close enough now that he could see the rapid pulse at her throat, close enough to catch the subtle scent of her perfume. What if you didn't have to control it? He asked. What if you just let yourself feel it? I don't know how to do that anymore. Then maybe it's time to learn. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Lucas could see the war happening behind Victoria's eyes. The CEO, who calculated every risk against the woman who'd spent 10 years building walls around her heart. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Then again. The spell broke, reality crashing back in. Victoria glanced at the screen. I have a board meeting in 10 minutes. Right. Of course. Lucas stepped back, creating appropriate distance. I should get to work anyway. Morrison wants the quarterly analysis by noon. Lucas, wait. Victoria's voice stopped him at the door. When he turned, she was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. The SVP position. Have you made a decision? Not yet. What's holding you back? You, Lucas thought. The fear that accepting it would complicate this even more. The worry that people would talk. The concern that Emily's stability would be threatened by gossip and speculation. I want to make sure I'm accepting it for the right reasons, he said instead. Victoria nodded slowly. And what would the right reasons be? That I've earned it. That I can do the job well. That it's good for my daughter's future. He paused. Not because of anything else. Understanding flickered in her eyes. You've earned it, Lucas. Everything else is just noise. After he left, Lucas made it halfway to the elevator before his hands started shaking again. The conversation had been a roller coaster, professional concern to raw vulnerability, to something that felt dangerously close to confession. He'd seen Victoria Hale, not just the CEO. He'd seen the grief she carried, the loneliness she'd built an empire to escape, the woman beneath the armor. And it terrified him how much he wanted to know more. The week unfolded in a strange dance of proximity and distance. Work through them together constantly. Strategy meetings, analysis reviews, the ongoing Maxim negotiations that required Lucas's expertise. But they maintained careful boundaries, never alone longer than necessary, never straying from professional topics, never acknowledging the Monday morning conversation that had changed the atmosphere between them. Except it was there in every interaction, in the way Victoria's eyes lingered on him a second too long during presentations, in the way Lucas found himself volunteering for projects that would put him in her orbit, in the loaded silences that spoke louder than words. Marcus noticed first. Okay, what's going on with you and the Ice Queen? He asked Thursday afternoon, perching on the edge of Lucas's desk. Lucas's head snapped up. What are you talking about? Come on, man, I'm not blind. The tension between you two could power the whole building. Did something happen? No, nothing happened. We're just working on the Maxim deal. Right. And I'm just working on my tan. Marcus studied him with the intensity of someone who'd known Lucas long enough to read between the lines. Look, I'm not judging. Victoria Hale is brilliant, beautiful, and terrifying. If there's something there, there's nothing there, Lucas said firmly. She's my boss, that's it. Your boss who looks at you like you're the only person in the room. Your boss who specifically requests you for every major meeting. Your boss who… Marcus, drop it. Something in Lucas's tone must have conveyed the seriousness, because Marcus held up his hands in surrender. Okay, dropped. But for what it's worth, I've worked here for 5 years. I've never seen Victoria look at anyone the way she looks at you. The words haunted Lucas for the rest of the day. Was it really that obvious? Could everyone see what they were both trying so hard to hide? And if people were already noticing, already talking, what did that mean for Emily's stability? For his career? For Victoria's reputation? That evening, he picked Emily up from her after-school program and took her to their favorite pizza place, a tiny hole-in-the-wall joint that served slices bigger than her head and had arcade games in the corner. She dominated the air hockey table while Lucas watched, his mind only half on the game. "Daddy, you're not paying attention," Emily accused, the puck sailing past his paddle for the 3rd time. "Sorry, sweetheart. Just thinking about work." "Is your job hard?" Lucas considered the question. "Sometimes, but it's good. I like the challenge." "Is your boss nice?" The innocent question hit Lucas like a punch. "Yeah, she's very nice. Very smart." "What's her name?" "Ms. Hale. Victoria." Emily tested the name, rolling it around in her mouth like a new flavor of ice cream. "Victoria. That's pretty, like a princess." "Kind of like a princess," Lucas agreed, thinking of Victoria in her corner office, surveying her empire. "Except instead of a castle, she has a very tall building." "Does she have a prince?" The question was so earnest, so completely innocent, that Lucas had to fight not to react. "No, I don't think so. She's very busy with work." "That's sad," Emily pronounced with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old. "Everyone should have someone, like you have me, and I have you." Lucas's throat tightened. "Yeah, sweetheart. Everyone should have someone." Later, after Emily was asleep and Lucas was nursing a beer at his kitchen counter, his phone buzzed with an email. He almost ignored it. It was nearly 10, well past reasonable work hours. But something made him check. From Victoria Hale to Lucas Grant. Sent, 9:47 p.m. Subject, tomorrow. Lucas, the Maxim team is delivering their revised contracts tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll need you there. Conference room A. Also, we need to talk. Not about Maxim, about Monday. Can you stay after? V. Lucas stared at the email, reading it 3 times, analyzing every word like it was a financial report. The professional request was clear enough. But that last part, we need to talk, carried weight that made his heart race. He should say no, should maintain boundaries, should protect the careful distance they'd been maintaining all week. His fingers moved across the screen before his brain could override them. From Lucas Grant to Victoria Hale. Sent, 9:52 p.m. Subject, RE. Tomorrow, I'll be there. Both for the meeting and after. Lucas. The response came back in less than a minute. Thank you. 2 words. Nothing more. But Lucas felt them like a touch. He didn't sleep well that night, kept thinking about Emily's innocent question, does she have a prince? And Victoria's admission that she'd forgotten how to want things for herself. Kept replaying every conversation, every loaded glance, every moment when the space between them had felt charged with possibility. By the time Friday afternoon arrived, Lucas felt like he'd been wound too tight, every nerve ending on high alert. The Maxim meeting was scheduled for 2. At 1:30, he gathered his notes and headed for conference room A. Victoria was already there, reviewing documents with Patricia Morrison. She looked up when Lucas entered, and for just a second her professional mask slipped. He saw nervousness there, anticipation, and something that looked like hope. "Lucas, good. Patricia and I were just reviewing the compliance requirements we'll need Maxim to address." The next 90 minutes were a masterclass in negotiation. The Maxim executives arrived with revised contracts, confidence radiating from every pore. They'd addressed Lucas's concerns, they insisted. Everything was in order now. Lucas spent the meeting methodically dismantling their assurances, pointing out loopholes in the new supplier agreements, questioning the verification processes, highlighting risks they'd tried to bury in legal language. By the time he finished, the Maxim team looked like they'd been through a war. "So what you're saying," Rothman said tightly, "is that our revised proposal still isn't acceptable." "What I'm saying," Lucas replied evenly, "is that the foundation still isn't solid. You're building a skyscraper on sand and hoping we won't notice." "These are standard industry practices. Standard doesn't mean sound," Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension. "Mr. Grant has identified significant structural risks in your supply chain. Until those are genuinely addressed, not just papered over with legal language, we can't move forward." "Ms. Hale, with all respect, if you're not interested in this merger—" "I'm extremely interested in the merger," Victoria said calmly. "I'm just not interested in acquiring a company that's going to cost me hundreds of millions in compliance failures within the first year. Fix the foundation, and we'll talk. Otherwise, I think we're done here." The Maxim executives left with barely concealed fury. Patricia gathered her materials with an approving nod toward Lucas. "Nicely done. You saved us from a disaster." She paused at the door, glancing back at Victoria. "I'll have our team draft a formal position for the board. We can revisit Maxim in 6 months if they actually address the issues." Then she was gone, and Lucas and Victoria were alone in the conference room. The silence felt deafening. Victoria stood, moving to the windows. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floor. "You just killed that deal for good," Lucas said quietly. "I know." She didn't turn around. "But you were right. Better to walk away now than clean up the mess later." "Are we still talking about Maxim?" The question hung in the air. Victoria's shoulders tensed. "Lucas, what are we doing?" The raw vulnerability in her voice made him move closer. "I don't know. We can't keep doing this, the tension, the loaded conversations. The way I can't stop thinking about you when I should be focused on work." She finally turned to face him, and her eyes were bright with emotion. "It's affecting my judgment. That scares me." "Your judgment is fine. You made the right call on Maxim." "Because of you. Because I trust your analysis more than I trust my own instincts anymore. Because when you're in the room, She stopped, pressing her lips together as if physically holding back the words. "Because when I'm in the room, what?" Lucas asked, closing more distance. "Because when you're in the room, I remember what it feels like to want something that isn't about business, to want someone who sees past the CEO to the person underneath, to want—" She closed her eyes. "To want you." The admission landed like a bomb in the quiet room. Lucas felt his carefully constructed walls crumbling, all his careful reasoning dissolving in the face of her honesty. "Victoria, I know all the reasons this is impossible," she continued, eyes still closed as if she couldn't bear to see his reaction. "I know I'm your boss. I know you have a daughter to think about. I know the gossip could destroy both our careers. I know every rational argument against this. Then why are we having this conversation?" "Because I'm tired," she whispered. "I'm tired of being alone. Tired of building empires while my personal life crumbles into nothing. Tired of lying awake at night wondering what it would be like if I just let myself—" She opened her eyes, and Lucas saw everything there. Longing, fear, desperate hope. "Let yourself what?" "Let myself fall," Victoria finished. "For you." Lucas's heart hammered against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to protect Emily, to preserve the stability he'd fought so hard to create. But standing in front of him was a woman who'd spent a decade building armor around her heart, and she was asking, no, begging, for permission to take it off. "If we do this," Lucas said carefully, "everything changes. Your company, my career, Emily's stability. We can't go back." "I know. People will talk. They'll say you promoted me because of this. They'll question every decision you make involving me." "I know. And if it doesn't work out, if we try this and it falls apart, the consequences could be catastrophic." "I know," Victoria said again, taking a step closer. "I've run every scenario, calculated every risk. None of them have good odds. But Lucas, I've spent my entire adult life making smart decisions, safe decisions, calculated decisions. And I've built an empire, but I've also built a prison. I don't want to die alone in a corner office surrounded by quarterly reports. Lucas felt something crack open in his chest. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm terrified. I'm saying this is probably the worst idea either of us has ever had. I'm saying every logical part of my brain is screaming at me to stop. She reached up, her hand trembling as she touched his face. But I'm also saying I can't stop thinking about you. And maybe, just this once, I want to make a decision based on what I feel instead of what makes sense. Her palm was warm against his cheek. Lucas could feel his resolve wavering, could feel himself leaning into the touch despite every warning siren going off in his head. My daughter, he said hoarsely. Emily has to come first, no matter what. I know. I wouldn't want you any other way. And if this affects her, if it causes problems, then we stop. We figure it out. We put her first. Victoria's eyes searched his. But Lucas, we can't keep pretending this isn't happening. We can't keep dancing around it. So what do we do? I don't know, she admitted, but I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. Lucas knew he should step back, knew he should leave this room, accept the SVP position with clear boundaries, and maintain professional distance. That was the smart play, the safe play. But standing there with Victoria's hand against his face, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, feeling the pull that had been growing stronger every day for months, safe didn't feel like enough anymore. This is crazy, he whispered. I know. We could both lose everything. I know. But you want to try anyway. Yes, Victoria breathed. I want to try anyway. Lucas closed his eyes, making a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. When he opened them again, he saw relief flood Victoria's features. Okay, he said, but we do this carefully, slowly. We protect Emily. We maintain professional boundaries at work. And if at any point this becomes too complicated, we stop, Victoria agreed. No questions asked. They stood there for a long moment, neither quite sure what happened next. The weight of the decision hung between them, monumental and terrifying. Lucas's phone buzzed, a text from Emily's grandmother. Running late for pickup. Can you get her from school? Reality crashed back in. I have to go. Emily. Go, Victoria said immediately, stepping back. We can figure out the details later. Lucas nodded, grabbing his laptop bag. At the door, he paused. Victoria? Yeah? This doesn't change that I want the SVP position because I've earned it. She smiled, the expression soft and genuine. I know, and you have. As Lucas left the building, his mind raced with everything that had just happened, everything that might happen, all the ways this could go spectacularly right or catastrophically wrong. He just agreed to pursue something with the CEO of his company, a woman worth billions, a woman who could change his life in every possible way. And he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. But for the first time in 5 years, the uncertainty didn't feel like danger. It felt like possibility. The subway car rattled through the tunnel, and Lucas stared at his reflection in the dark window, barely recognizing the man looking back at him. 20 minutes ago, he'd been standing in conference room A, agreeing to pursue something with Victoria Hale that defied every careful decision he'd made in the past 5 years. Now he was heading to pick up his daughter from school, and the two worlds felt impossibly far apart. His phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Take your time with Emily. We'll figure everything out. No rush. No rush. As if they hadn't just agreed to upend both their lives. As if the decision wasn't already spreading ripples through everything Lucas had built. He found Emily waiting outside the school, her backpack nearly as big as she was, chatting animatedly with another little girl about some elaborate game they'd invented at recess. When she saw him, her face lit up with uncomplicated joy. Daddy, you're early! Grandma got stuck in traffic, so I get you all to myself, Lucas said, scooping her into a hug. She smelled like playground dirt and cafeteria pizza in childhood, and something in his chest tightened with protective fierceness. Can we get ice cream? It's February, sweetheart. Ice cream doesn't have a season, Daddy. That's what Grandma says. Lucas laughed despite the turmoil in his head. Grandma is a dangerous influence, but yes, we can get ice cream. They walked to their favorite parlor, Emily's small hand in his, and Lucas tried to be present in the moment. Tried not to think about Victoria's trembling hand on his face, her admission that she was tired of being alone, the way the afternoon light had caught in her eyes when she'd asked permission to fall for him. "Daddy, you're doing it again," Emily said, tugging his hand. "Doing what?" "Thinking about work. You get this look, like you're somewhere else." Lucas knelt down to her level on the sidewalk, meeting her serious brown eyes. "You're right. I'm sorry. Work has been complicated lately." "Is it because of the princess?" The question hit him like ice water. "What?" "Victoria, the one with the tall building. You said she was like a princess." Emily tilted her head, studying him with the unsettling perceptiveness of children. "Do you like her?" Lucas's mind raced. How did he answer that? How did he explain to a 7-year-old that yes, he liked her, and it was terrifying and wonderful and potentially catastrophic all at once? "She's my boss," he said carefully. "And yes, I like working with her. She's very smart." "But do you like her? Like how Prince Philip likes Princess Aurora in Sleeping Beauty?" "Emily, it's not that simple." "Why not? If you like someone and they like you back, that's good. That's what all the stories say." Lucas pulled her into a hug, wishing desperately that life worked like fairy tales. "Real life is more complicated than stories, sweetheart. But I promise, if anything changes, if anything affects you, you'll be the first to know. Okay?" Emily hugged him back, fierce and trusting. "Okay, Daddy." The weekend unfolded with deliberate normalcy. Lucas took Emily to the park, helped her with homework, made pancakes shaped like dinosaurs on Sunday morning. But beneath the routine, his mind kept circling back to Friday afternoon, to the decision he'd made, to the impossibility of what came next. Victoria texted once on Saturday, "How are you?" Lucas stared at the message for 10 minutes before responding, "Good, spending time with Emily. You?" "Working, thinking, missing our conversations." The admission made his heart skip. "We'll talk Monday. I'm counting on it." Monday arrived with rain drumming against the windows, the kind of gray February morning that made the city feel subdued and introspective. Lucas dressed carefully, conscious of the fact that today marked a shift, a before and after line in his carefully ordered life. The office felt different, or maybe Lucas felt different. Every interaction seemed heightened, every glance from colleagues tinged with potential meaning. Was Marcus watching him too closely? Did Patricia's greeting carry extra scrutiny? Or was it all in his head, paranoia born from a secret that hadn't even had time to become real yet? Victoria was in meetings all morning. Lucas caught glimpses of her through glass conference room walls, always surrounded by executives, always radiating controlled authority. But once, she glanced up and their eyes met across the floor, and the look she gave him made his breath catch. At noon, an email arrived. "Lunch?" "My office, 12:30. I'll have something brought in." Lucas's pulse jumped. They'd never had lunch alone before, always in the company cafeteria, always surrounded by colleagues, always maintaining appropriate distance. He replied simply, "I'll be there." When he arrived at Victoria's office, she was standing at the window, her back to the door. She'd removed her suit jacket, and her white blouse seemed somehow more intimate than formal wear ever could. "Come in," she said without turning around. "Close the door." Lucas did, his heart hammering. The office suddenly felt smaller with the door closed, more private, charged with possibility. "I had them bring up sandwiches from that deli you like," Victoria said, finally turning to face him. "The one on Lexington. I hope that's okay." The fact that she knew his favorite deli, that she'd paid attention to such a small detail, made something warm bloom in Lucas's chest. "That's perfect. Thank you." They sat at the small table by the window rather than at her desk, an informality that felt significant. For a few minutes, they ate in silence, the rain pattering against the glass, the city spread out below them like a living map of possibilities. "I've been thinking," Victoria said finally, setting down her sandwich, "about what happens next, how we navigate this." "I've been thinking about that too." "And?" Lucas took a breath. "We need rules, clear boundaries. Emily comes first, always. Work and personal stay separate as much as possible. We're discreet until we're sure this is something real and not just," he struggled for the right words, "not just loneliness and proximity and the thrill of something forbidden." Victoria finished, her tone dry but understanding. "Yeah, I agree with all of that. But Lucas, I need you to understand something. She leaned forward, her eyes intense. I don't do anything halfway. If we're doing this, if we're really trying this, I'm all in. I'm not interested in some casual thing that fizzles out when it gets complicated. What are you interested in? Something real, something that matters, something worth the risk we're both taking. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near his. I've spent 10 years building walls. I'm not taking them down for something temporary. Lucas looked at her hand, then at her face, seeing the vulnerability beneath the determination. Slowly, carefully, he covered her hand with his. The touch was electric, intimate in a way that went beyond physical contact. I'm not interested in temporary either, he said quietly, but I need to know you understand what you're signing up for. I'm not just me. I come with a 7-year-old who asks hard questions and needs stability and deserves a father who makes smart choices. I know, and that's one of the things Victoria paused, seeming to struggle with the words. One of the things I admire most about you. The way you put her first. The way you've rebuilt your life around being the father she needs. It's not always easy. The things that matter never are. Victoria turned her hand over, linking their fingers. I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise it won't get complicated. But I can promise I'll respect your boundaries. I'll put Emily's well-being first, and I'll be honest with you, even when it's hard. They sat like that for a long moment, hands linked across the table, the rain creating a curtain of privacy between them and the world outside. We should probably discuss the practical stuff, Lucas said eventually. Like how we handle this at work. We maintain absolute professionalism. No one can have any ammunition to claim favoritism or impropriety. Victoria's expression turned serious. That means the SVP promotion goes through proper channels. Patricia and the board will review it independently. If anyone questions it, the numbers have to speak for themselves. They will. I've earned that position. I know you have. But we need to be beyond reproach. She squeezed his hand. And we need to be smart about when and where we see each other outside work. No public places initially. No company events until we're ready for the scrutiny. So we're talking about sneaking around, Lucas said, a hint of humor in his tone despite the seriousness. We're talking about being strategic. There's a difference. Is there? Because it sounds like we're planning to hide. Victoria's jaw tightened slightly. We're planning to protect what we're building, to give it a chance to become real before it gets dissected by gossip and speculation. Unless you'd prefer to make a company-wide announcement that the CEO and her analyst are dating. The word, dating, hung between them, making it suddenly more concrete, more real. No, Lucas admitted. You're right. We need to be careful. I don't want this to be some guilty secret we're ashamed of. I'm not ashamed of anything, Victoria said fiercely, but I'm also not naive. I've seen careers destroyed by office relationships that went public too soon. I won't let that happen to you. Or to us. Her phone buzzed on the desk. Then again. Victoria glanced at it and sighed. The Singapore office. They've been trying to reach me all morning. Go, Lucas said, standing. We can talk more later. Victoria stood too, and for a moment they just looked at each other, separated by 3 feet of space that felt both vast and negligible. Thank you, she said softly, for being willing to try this, for not running when I gave you every reason to. Thank you for being honest, for letting me see past the armor. Victoria moved closer, close enough that Lucas could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. She reached up, her hand cupping his face the way she had Friday afternoon. I'm terrified, she whispered. Me too. But less terrified when I'm with you. Lucas covered her hand with his, leaning into the touch. Yeah, me too. The moment stretched, charged with everything they weren't saying, everything they were still learning to admit. Then Victoria's phone buzzed again, shattering the spell. Singapore waits for no one, she said with a rueful smile, stepping back. Go save the world. I'll see you later. As Lucas left her office, he felt like he was walking on unstable ground, every step taking him further from the safety he'd built and closer to something thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. The afternoon passed in a blur of spreadsheets and analysis, but Lucas's mind kept drifting back to Victoria's office, to the feel of her hand in his, to the promise they'd made to try something neither of them fully understood. It was nearly 6 when his phone buzzed with a text. "Can you stay late? Emily with her grandmother tonight?" Lucas checked his messages. Emily was indeed at her grandmother's, a previously scheduled sleepover he'd forgotten about in the chaos of the past few days. "Yes." "How late?" "However late you want." The implications of those words sent heat through Lucas's chest. He forced himself to breathe normally, to finish the task at hand, to maintain the appearance of business as usual. By 7, the office had cleared out. Lucas made his way to the executive suite, finding Victoria's door open. The woman herself standing at her windows like she always did, silhouetted against the city lights. "You're here," she said without turning around. "I'm here. I ordered dinner, Italian from that place in Chelsea. It should arrive in about 20 minutes. You didn't have to." "I wanted to." Victoria finally turned to face him, and in the dim light of her office, with the city glowing behind her, she looked less like a CEO and more like a woman trying to figure out how to be vulnerable. "I wanted to do something normal, like ordering takeout and having dinner with someone I—" She trailed off. "Someone you what?" "Someone I care about," Victoria finished, the words seeming to cost her something. "I'm not good at this, Lucas. At letting people in. At admitting I need something beyond spreadsheets and quarterly reports." Lucas moved closer, drawn by her honesty. "You're doing fine." "Am I?" "Because I feel like I'm improvising without a script. Everything in my life is usually calculated, planned, controlled. This is—" She gestured helplessly between them. "This is none of those things." "No," Lucas agreed. "It's not. But maybe that's okay. Maybe not everything needs to be controlled." Victoria laughed, the sound brittle. "That's easy for you to say. You're not someone whose every decision gets analyzed by shareholders and board members and business journalists." "No, I'm just someone whose every decision affects a 7-year-old who trusts me to keep her world stable." Lucas closed the remaining distance between them. "We're both carrying weight, Victoria, just different kinds." She looked up at him, and he saw the exhaustion there, the loneliness that power couldn't ease, the longing for something real in a world of transactions and negotiations. "What if I'm not good at this?" she asked quietly. "What if I'm so broken from years of building walls that I don't remember how to let someone in?" "Then we figure it out together. One day at a time, one dinner at a time, one honest conversation at a time." Victoria's eyes searched his face. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple, but it's not impossible either." The food arrived with perfect timing, breaking the intensity of the moment. They ate at her small conference table, talking about everything except work, books, movies, childhood memories. Lucas learned that Victoria had wanted to be an architect when she was young, that she'd spent a semester in Barcelona and still dreamed in Spanish sometimes, that she missed her brother every single day, but had learned to carry the grief like a familiar weight. She learned that Lucas had played guitar in college, that he'd proposed to his ex-wife on a beach in Maine during a thunderstorm, that becoming a father had rearranged every priority in his life in ways he'd never anticipated. "Do you regret it?" Victoria asked, refilling their wine glasses. "The marriage ending?" Lucas considered the question. "I regret that we couldn't make it work. That Emily had to experience that instability. But no, I don't regret the marriage itself. It gave me my daughter, and it taught me what I need in a partner." "Which is?" "Someone who sees me, not just the father or the employee, but the whole person. Someone who challenges me. Someone who—" He met her eyes across the table. "Someone who isn't afraid of complicated." Victoria's breath caught. "And have you found that someone?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Lucas set down his glass, his heart pounding. "I think I might be looking at her right now." The admission seemed to freeze time. Victoria's hand trembled slightly as she set down her own glass, her eyes bright with emotion. "Lucas, I need to tell you something." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And I need you to really hear me." "I'm listening." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I got a call this afternoon. From the Maxim Corp board. They want to revisit the merger, but with different terms. Bigger terms. They're offering a full international expansion, 17 new markets, dual headquarters in New York and Singapore, a partnership that would triple the size of Hale Industries." Lucas felt his stomach drop. That's huge. It's everything I've been working toward for 10 years. It's the kind of deal that defines legacies, that transforms companies into empires. Victoria's eyes never left his. But it would require me to split my time between New York and Singapore. 6 months here, 6 months there, for at least the first 3 years of the expansion. The implications crashed over Lucas like a wave. 6 months apart. Half a year of different time zones, different continents, different lives. The thing they were just starting to build would be impossible to sustain across that kind of distance. "When do you have to decide?" he asked, his voice remarkably steady considering the chaos in his chest. "They want an answer by the end of the week. They're meeting with other potential partners if I decline." "So you're telling me this because you deserve to know." Victoria stood, moving to the window again, her silhouette tense against the lights. "Because 3 days ago, I would have said yes immediately without thinking twice. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, but now. She turned, and the vulnerability in her expression nearly undid him. "But now I'm standing here wondering if building an empire is worth losing something real before I even have a chance to see what it could become." Lucas stood, moving to join her at the window. "Victoria, you can't make a decision like that based on something that barely exists yet. We've had one lunch, one dinner. This thing between us is so new it's practically theoretical." "Is that what it feels like to you? Theoretical?" "No," Lucas admitted. "It feels terrifying and wonderful and way too important for how little time we've actually spent together. But that doesn't change the reality. You're being offered the chance to achieve everything you've worked for." "At what cost?" Victoria's voice cracked. "I've spent 10 years building Hale Industries into something incredible. And I've spent 10 years alone, completely, utterly alone. I have a penthouse full of expensive furniture and no one to share it with. I have more money than I could spend in 5 lifetimes, and no one who cares about me beyond what I can offer them professionally." "That's not true, isn't it?" She laughed bitterly. "Name one person in my life who isn't on my payroll or trying to make a deal with me. One person who would still be there if I lost everything tomorrow?" Lucas wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He'd seen her life over the past 6 months. The constant meetings, the transactional relationships, the loneliness that permeated even her most successful days. "You could have that," he said quietly, "but not with me. Not if you're in Singapore half the year. Long-distance relationships are hard enough without the complexity we're already facing." "I know." Victoria's shoulders sagged. "Which is why this decision feels impossible. Take the deal and achieve everything I've dreamed of professionally, but stay alone. Or decline the deal and maybe, possibly, have a chance at something real with you. Except there's no guarantee we'll work out either. I could give up the opportunity of a lifetime for something that might fall apart in 6 months anyway." The brutal honesty of it hung between them. Lucas felt the weight of the decision she was facing, the impossible choice between ambition and connection, between the empire she'd built and the life she desperately wanted. "When did they make the offer?" he asked. "This afternoon, right after you left my office. And you didn't tell me at dinner. I wanted one normal evening, one night where we could just be 2 people getting to know each other without the weight of impossible decisions hanging over us." She looked at him with eyes full of unshed tears. "Was that wrong?" "No," Lucas said, pulling her into his arms before he could think better of it. "No, it wasn't wrong." Victoria melted into the embrace, her forehead resting against his chest, her hands clutching his shirt. Lucas felt her trembling and held her tighter, wishing he could offer some solution, some way to make the decision easier. "I don't know what to do," she whispered against his chest. "For the first time in my professional life, I genuinely don't know what to do." "Then let's break it down, logically, the way you would any business decision." Lucas pulled back slightly, enough to see her face. "What does your head say?" Victoria took a shaky breath. "My head says take the deal. It's everything I've worked for. It's the culmination of a decade of strategy and sacrifice. Declining it would be professionally insane." "And what does your heart say?" She closed her eyes. "My heart says I'm tired of being alone. That I've built an empire but forgotten to build a life. That I don't want to die at 75, surrounded by quarterly reports and regrets about the chances I didn't take." "Those are both valid," Lucas said carefully. "But they're completely contradictory. Maybe. Or maybe there's a third option we're not seeing yet." Victoria opened her eyes, searching his face. Like what? I don't know. But you have until the end of the week to decide. That's 4 days. Maybe we use that time to really explore what this is between us, to see if it's worth the risk. And then you make your decision with all the information. You mean like a trial period? I mean like giving ourselves a real chance to figure out if this is something that could sustain an impossible choice. Lucas cupped her face in his hands. 4 days? We're honest with each other. We're present with each other. We see what this could be. And then Friday, you make whatever decision is right for you. And what if I decide to take the Singapore deal? The question hurt, but Lucas forced himself to answer honestly. Then I'll understand. I'll be disappointed, but I'll understand. You can't give up your dreams for someone you barely know. Even if that someone makes me feel more alive than I've felt in 10 years? Lucas's throat tightened. Even then, because if you resent me for it later, for being the reason you gave up everything you worked for, that resentment will destroy us anyway. Victoria leaned into his touch, her eyes closing. How are you so wise about this? I'm not wise. I'm terrified. But I learned from my divorce that building a relationship on resentment and sacrifice is a recipe for disaster. If we do this, it has to be because you genuinely want it, not because you're running from loneliness or making some grand romantic gesture. And if I want both, the expansion and you, then we find a way to make it work. But Victoria, I can't do 6 months apart, not when this is so new, not when I have Emily to consider. Long distance across continents isn't just hard, it's a setup for failure. She nodded slowly, accepting the reality. So 4 days. 4 days. And then I choose. And then you choose. Victoria opened her eyes, and they were clear now, determined. Okay. 4 days. But Lucas, I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me you won't hold back. Don't protect me or soften things because you think it'll make my decision easier. I need to know the real you, the complicated, messy, beautiful real you, because if I'm going to choose, I need to know what I'm actually choosing. Lucas felt the weight of her request. She was asking for complete honesty, complete vulnerability, in a time frame that felt impossibly short for that kind of depth. I promise, he said, no holding back, no protecting you from the complicated parts. Thank you. They stood there in the quiet of her office, the city lights creating a backdrop of endless possibility, both knowing that the next 4 days would determine the trajectory of their lives in ways neither could fully predict. I should go, Lucas said finally, though he made no move to leave. It's late. Stay, Victoria whispered. Just a little longer, please. So they moved to the couch, and Victoria curled into his side, and they talked until midnight about everything and nothing, childhood dreams and adult realities, fears and hopes, the small moments that had led them both to this impossible crossroads. And when Lucas finally left, walking through the empty building to catch a late train home, he felt like he was balanced on a knife's edge between everything he'd carefully built and everything he desperately wanted. 4 days. 4 days to discover if what they were feeling was real enough to warrant an impossible choice. 4 days before Victoria Hale would have to decide between the empire she'd spent a decade building and the chance at something that might finally make her feel less alone. Lucas stared out the subway window at his own reflection, seeing a man who'd agreed to something reckless and brave and potentially devastating. And somewhere across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the same skyline, Victoria Hale was probably staring out her own window, running scenarios and calculations, trying to find a logical solution to a problem that defied logic. Because how do you choose between everything you've worked for and everything you've always wanted? How do you calculate the worth of a human connection against the weight of professional legacy? How do you risk it all on something that might not even survive the pressure of the decision itself? Lucas didn't know the answers, but he knew that in 4 days, Victoria would have to find them. And whatever she decided would change both their lives forever. Tuesday morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of winter day that made the city feel sharp-edged and unforgiving. Lucas woke to find a text from Victoria, sent at 5:30 in the morning. Couldn't sleep. Keep thinking about yesterday, about the choice, about you. He stared at the message for a long moment before responding. Me too. What time do you want to meet today? Lunch? But somewhere outside the office. Somewhere we can actually talk. Send me the address. Emily was already awake when Lucas emerged from his bedroom, sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal and a book about marine biology that was definitely too advanced for a 7-year-old, but that she was reading anyway with fierce concentration. "Morning, sweetheart," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head. "Did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?" Emily announced without looking up from her book. "And they can change color to match their surroundings. That's called camouflage." "I did know that, actually. And they're really smart. Like, they can solve puzzles and open jars and remember things." She finally looked up at him, her expression serious. "Do you think people can be like octopuses? Like, can we change who we are depending on where we are?" The question hit Lucas with unexpected force. "What do you mean? Like, are you different at work than you are at home? Do you change colors like an octopus?" Lucas sat down across from her, considering how to answer honestly. "Yeah, I think people do that sometimes. At work, I have to be professional and focused. At home, I get to be your dad and be silly and make dinosaur pancakes. It's not exactly changing colors, but it's kind of similar. Is that why you've been different lately?" His heart skipped. "Different how?" Emily shrugged, going back to her cereal. "I don't know, just different. Like you're thinking about something a lot. Grandma says adults get like that when they're worried about something." "I'm not worried, sweetheart. Just figuring some things out." "Is it about Victoria, the princess with the tall building?" Lucas took a breath. Emily's perceptiveness never failed to catch him off guard. "Kind of, yeah, but nothing for you to worry about." "I'm not worried," Emily said matter-of-factly. "I just want you to be happy. You're happier when you talk about her." Your voice gets softer. The observation was so innocent, so honest, that Lucas felt his chest tighten. "You're pretty smart, you know that?" "I know," Emily said with the absolute confidence of childhood. "It's because I read a lot." After dropping Emily at school, Lucas headed to the office with his mind churning. 4 days had seemed like enough time last night, but in the cold light of morning, it felt impossibly short. How do you compress the slow discovery of a relationship into 96 hours? How do you build something real when you're working against a deadline? The morning passed in a blur of meetings and emails, but Lucas's attention kept drifting to the clock, counting down the hours until lunch. At 11:30, Victoria texted him an address in Greenwich Village, a small French bistro that Lucas had walked past 100 times but never entered. He arrived first, taking a corner table that offered some privacy from the lunch crowd. When Victoria walked in 10 minutes later, she looked different somehow. Still elegant, still composed, but wearing jeans and a cream sweater instead of her usual power suit. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves around her shoulders. And without the armor of corporate attire, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi. You look different?" Victoria supplied with a small smile. "I thought maybe if I'm trying to figure out who I am beyond the CEO, I should probably stop dressing like one for a few hours." "It suits you." "Does it? I feel like I'm playing dress-up. Like any minute someone's going to recognize me and wonder why Victoria Hale is sitting in a bistro in jeans. Or maybe they'll just see a woman having lunch," Lucas suggested gently. They ordered, and for a few minutes, there was comfortable silence. Then Victoria set down her water glass and met his eyes with characteristic directness. "I want to tell you something I've never told anyone," she said, "about the night my brother died." Lucas reached across the table, offering his hand. She took it gratefully. "Everyone knows about the accident. The drunk driver, the red light, the tragic loss of a brilliant young entrepreneur." Victoria's voice was steady, but her grip on his hand tightened. "What they don't know is that Daniel and I had a fight that morning. A stupid fight about the company direction. I wanted to expand into new markets. He wanted to consolidate what we had. I told him he was being short-sighted. He told me I was being reckless." She paused, swallowing hard. "The last thing I said to my brother was that he didn't have the vision to see where the company could go. I was angry, so I said it cruelly. And then he left, and 6 hours later he was gone." Tears welled in her eyes, but didn't fall. "So I spent the next 10 years proving him wrong, expanding into every market I could find, building an empire that would show everyone, including the ghost of my brother, that I did have vision, that I could see further than anyone." "Victoria, but what if I was wrong?" she interrupted, her voice cracking. "What if Daniel was right, And I've spent a decade building bigger and bigger and bigger because I couldn't face the fact that the last conversation with my brother was a fight I started. What if this Singapore expansion is just more of the same? More running from the guilt, more trying to prove something to someone who isn't even here to see it. Lucas stood, moving to sit beside her in the booth so he could pull her into his arms. She came willingly, pressing her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with silent sobs. "You can't know what your brother would think," Lucas said quietly, stroking her hair. "But I know what I think. I think you've built something incredible. I think you've honored his memory by making his vision bigger than he ever imagined. And I think maybe, just maybe, it's okay to stop proving yourself to ghosts and start living for yourself." Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. "That's what this is about, isn't it, the Singapore decision? It's not really about the expansion or the opportunity or the legacy. It's about whether I keep running or finally stand still long enough to build something real. Only you can answer that." "But you're part of the equation now," Victoria said, her eyes searching his face. "If I choose you, choose this, I need to know it's real. I need to know you're not just some lifeline I'm grabbing because I'm drowning in loneliness. And I need to know you're choosing me because you actually want this life, not because you're running from the one you've built." The honesty hung between them, raw and necessary. Their food arrived, breaking the intensity of the moment, and they ate slowly, talking about lighter things, favorite books, worse first dates, the small humiliations of growing up that shape who we become. "I proposed to my ex-wife during a thunderstorm," Lucas said, picking up the thread of a story he'd started. "We were on this beach in Maine, and the weather had been perfect all day. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, this storm rolled in. Most people ran for cover, but she just stood there in the rain, laughing. And I thought, this is it. This is the person I want." "What changed?" Victoria asked softly. Lucas was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "We did. Or maybe we just revealed who we always were. She wanted stability, predictability, a life that looked like her parents' life. I wanted, I don't know, something more. Not necessarily bigger, just more authentic. We had Emily, and we tried to make it work, but eventually we had to admit we were making each other miserable." "Do you regret Emily?" "Never. Not for 1 second. She's the best thing that ever happened to me." Lucas met Victoria's eyes. "But I learned something from that marriage. I learned that you can't build a life with someone if you're fundamentally running in different directions. Eventually, the distance becomes too much." The implication was clear. If Victoria chose Singapore, if she chose the expansion, they'd be running in different directions, and no amount of feeling could overcome that fundamental incompatibility. "What if I'm not ready to choose?" Victoria asked. "What if I need more than 4 days?" "Then you take more time. But the Maxim board wants an answer by Friday. That's the reality we're working with." "Unless I tell them I need longer to decide." "Can you do that?" Victoria laughed, the sound bitter. "I'm Victoria Hale. I can do whatever I want, except apparently figure out what will actually make me happy." They finished lunch and walked through the village, the cold February air biting at their faces. Victoria linked her arm through Lucas's, and the simple intimacy of it felt both natural and revolutionary. "Tell me about your dreams," Victoria said. "Not for Emily, not for your career, for you. What does Lucas Grant want out of life?" The question caught him off guard. "I don't think anyone's asked me that in years. I'm asking now." Lucas thought about it as they walked, really thought about it. "I want to feel like I'm building toward something. Not just surviving, not just getting through, but actually creating a life that matters. I want Emily to grow up seeing that it's possible to be happy and fulfilled, not just successful. I want—" He paused, gathering courage. "I want someone to share it with, someone who sees me, really sees me, and chooses to stay anyway. And if that someone comes with complications, with baggage and trauma, and a tendency to work too much and forget to eat, then I guess we figure it out together," Lucas said, pulling her closer. "Because the alternative is being alone and pretending that's enough." They ended up at Washington Square Park, sitting on a bench watching students and artists and the endless flow of city life. Victoria rested her head on Lucas's shoulder, and for a moment they were just two people trying to figure out how to navigate an impossible situation. "I have a confession," Victoria said. "I've been running scenarios in my head all morning, trying to find a way to make both things work. the expansion, and you. And the only solution I keep coming back to is asking you to wait. To give me the first year in Singapore, establish the expansion, then transition to a management structure that lets me stay in New York more. But that's not fair to you. That's asking you to put your life on hold while I chase my ambitions. It's also potentially asking you to give up on something we haven't even really started yet, Lucas pointed out. A year is a long time. People change. Feelings change. We barely know each other, Victoria. Asking me to wait a year for something that might not even survive the distance isn't just unfair. It's unrealistic. I know. She sat up, turning to face him. Which is why I think I know what I have to do. Lucas's heart hammered in his chest. Yeah? I'm going to decline the Singapore expansion. The words hung in the cold air between them. Lucas stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. Victoria, you can't make that decision right now. We've known each other, really known each other, for less than a week. I know that, but this isn't about you, Lucas. Not entirely. She took his hands in hers. This is about me finally being honest about what I actually want out of life. I've spent 10 years building an empire to prove something to myself, to my dead brother, to anyone who ever doubted me. And I've succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. But I'm also completely, utterly alone. And I'm tired. But if you're declining it because of me, I'm declining it because for the first time in a decade, I can see a different future. One where I'm not constantly on a plane, constantly in meetings, constantly building bigger and bigger. One where I might actually have time for a personal life, for relationships, for being human instead of just being successful. Lucas felt panic rising in his chest. What if we don't work out? What if you make this decision and then 3 months from now we realize we're not compatible? You'll have given up everything for nothing. Then I'll have given up the expansion, Victoria said calmly. Not everything. I'll still have Hale Industries. I'll still be successful. I'll still have built something incredible. I just won't have sacrificed the possibility of happiness on the altar of ever-increasing growth. Victoria, this is crazy. You can't— I can, she interrupted. And I am, because I finally understand what my brother was trying to tell me all those years ago. Sometimes consolidation isn't short-sightedness. Sometimes it's wisdom. Sometimes knowing when you have enough is actually the hardest and bravest choice. Lucas stood, pacing away from the bench, his mind reeling. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to take the full 4 days, really think it through, make a careful decision. Not sit on a park bench on a Tuesday afternoon and decide to give up the opportunity of a lifetime. This is too much pressure, he said, turning back to her. You're putting too much weight on something that barely exists. We've had a few conversations, a couple of meals. We haven't even— He stopped himself. Haven't even what? Victoria asked, standing to face him. Haven't even been on a real date. Haven't navigated a disagreement. Haven't seen each other at our worst. We're still in the fantasy phase, Victoria. Everything feels intense and perfect and possible because we don't actually know each other well enough for reality to set in. Then let's change that, Victoria said, stepping closer. Tonight, a real date. No office, no business talk, no pressure. Just dinner and conversation and seeing what this actually is when we're not theorizing about it. And if it's terrible, if we discover we have nothing to talk about outside of work, then I'll have learned something important before I make my final decision. Victoria's expression was determined. But I don't think that's going to happen. Do you? Lucas looked at her, this brilliant, complicated, lonely woman who was offering to upend her entire professional life on the possibility of something real, and felt his resistance crumbling. No, he admitted. I don't think that's going to happen. So tonight, 7 o'clock, I'll pick you up. You don't know where I live. Victoria pulled out her phone with a small smile. Lucas, I'm the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Finding out where you live would take approximately 30 seconds, but I was trying to be polite, so give me your address. Despite everything, Lucas laughed. You're terrifying when you want something, you know that? I've been told. She held out her phone expectantly. Address? Lucas typed it in, feeling like he was crossing another threshold, inviting her into the real parts of his life, instead of just the sanitized office version. It's not fancy, he warned. It's a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens that I share with a 7-year-old who leaves her toys everywhere. I don't need fancy, Lucas. I have fancy. I need real. I need— They parted ways at the park, Victoria heading back to the office for afternoon meetings, Lucas taking the long way back to clear his head. The conversation had spun out in ways he hadn't anticipated. She was talking about declining Singapore, about choosing him, choosing this, before they'd even had a proper date. It was reckless and romantic and potentially disastrous. It was also the bravest thing he'd ever seen anyone do. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Where are you?" "Morrison is looking for the quarterly analysis." Lucas swore under his breath. He'd completely forgotten about the analysis, had been so consumed by Victoria and impossible choices that work had faded into background noise. "On my way back now. We'll have it to her by 3. The afternoon passed in a blur of numbers and projections, Lucas forcing himself to focus on the concrete reality of spreadsheets and data instead of the swirling chaos of his personal life. But his mind kept drifting back to Victoria's face when she'd said she was declining Singapore, the certainty in her voice, the quiet revolution of choosing happiness over ambition. At 6:30, Lucas left the office and headed home, arriving just as Emily's grandmother was dropping her off. "Daddy!" Emily launched herself at him with her usual enthusiasm. "Grandma took me to the library and I got 3 new books about octopuses and we learned that they can taste with their arms and—" "Sweetheart, slow down," Lucas laughed, catching her in a hug. "I'm excited about the octopus books, but I need to talk to you about something." Emily's expression turned serious. "Okay." Lucas thanked her grandmother, waited until she'd left, then led Emily inside. They sat on the couch, and Lucas tried to figure out how to explain something he barely understood himself. "Remember how you asked me about Victoria, the princess with the tall building?" Emily nodded solemnly. "Well, she's going to come over tonight for dinner. Because we're getting to know each other better, as friends. But maybe as more than friends. Like as boyfriend and girlfriend." Lucas's heart clenched at the simple, innocent phrasing. "Maybe. Eventually. If things go well. But Emily, I need you to understand something really important. You come first. Always. If this makes you uncomfortable, or if you don't like her, or if anything about this situation doesn't feel right to you, you tell me, okay? Okay?" Emily was quiet for a moment, processing. "Is she nice?" "Very nice. She's smart and thoughtful and she works really hard." "Does she like octopuses?" Lucas laughed. "I don't know. You can ask her tonight. Can I show her my books?" "If you want to, but Emily, we're going to have dinner just the 2 of us. You'll meet her, but then you're going to hang out in your room while we talk, okay? This is grown-up time." Emily's face fell slightly. "But I want to get to know her too." "And you will. I promise. But tonight is just about us figuring some things out. Next time we can all spend time together. Deal?" "Deal," Emily agreed, though she looked disappointed. At exactly 7 o'clock, the buzzer rang. Lucas's heart jumped into his throat as he pressed the intercom. "It's me," Victoria's voice came through, sounding nervous. "Come on up, 4th floor, apartment 4B. Lucas glanced around the apartment, seeing it through Victoria's eyes. It was clean but cluttered, lived in, full of Emily's artwork on the fridge and toys in corners, and the general chaos of a life built around a 7-year-old's needs. It was the opposite of Victoria's sleek penthouse, the opposite of corporate elegance. It was real. The knock on the door came, and Lucas opened it to find Victoria standing in the hallway, holding a bottle of wine and looking more nervous than he'd ever seen her. She'd changed from her lunch outfit into a simple black dress, her hair still down, her makeup minimal. "Hi," she said. "Hi, come in." "Hi." Victoria stepped into the apartment, her eyes taking in everything. The mismatched furniture, the bookshelf overflowing with titles ranging from financial theory to children's stories, the small kitchen with its view of other buildings instead of skylines. "It's perfect," she said softly. "It's small and messy and nothing like what you're used to." "Exactly. It's perfect." Victoria set down the wine bottle and turned to face him. "Lucas, I've spent 10 years in pristine spaces that feel like museum exhibits. This feels like an actual home." Emily chose that moment to emerge from her bedroom, clutching her favorite octopus book, her eyes wide as she took in their visitor. "Hi," Emily said shyly. "Are you Victoria?" "I am." Victoria knelt down to Emily's level, her smile genuine and warm. And you must be Emily. Your dad talks about you all the time. Right? He talks about you too, Emily said with the brutal honesty of childhood. He says you're like a princess with a tall building. Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. I'm not really a princess. I just work in a very tall building. Do you like octopuses? I don't know much about them, actually. Emily's face lit up. Did you know they have 3 hearts? And they can change colors? And they're really, really smart? I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I have a book about them. Do you want to see? Victoria glanced at Lucas, who nodded permission. For the next 10 minutes, he watched as his daughter enthusiastically explained octopus biology to a billionaire CEO sitting cross-legged on his living room floor, and something in his chest cracked open at the sight. This was Victoria, without the armor, without the corporate mask, just a woman listening intently to a 7-year-old's passionate explanation of cephalopod hearts and camouflage capabilities, asking questions, genuinely engaged. Eventually, Lucas intervened. Okay, sweetheart, time to let the grown-ups have dinner. You can read in your room for a while. Emily hugged Victoria impulsively before running off to her bedroom, and Victoria stood, her eyes suspiciously bright. She's incredible, Victoria said. Lucas, she's absolutely incredible. Oh, she is, Lucas agreed, his throat tight. She's also perceptive and asks hard questions and deserves honesty, which is why I need to know, before this goes any further, that you're really sure about this. About declining Singapore, about choosing this life over that opportunity. Victoria moved closer, her expression serious. I haven't made the final call yet. I promised you 4 days. But Lucas, meeting Emily, seeing your home, watching you be a father, it's only confirming what I already knew. This is real. This life, this connection, this possibility of building something that matters beyond quarterly earnings, it's what I want. Even if it means giving up the expansion? Especially if it means giving up the expansion. She took his hands. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of building something. But I'm done building empires at the expense of everything else. If I can't have both Singapore and this, then I choose this. Lucas pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. You're sure? I'm terrified and uncertain and wondering if I'm making the biggest mistake of my life, Victoria admitted. But yes, I'm sure. They stood like that for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling over them both. Then Lucas led her to the small dining table where he'd set out a simple dinner, pasta and salad and bread. Nothing fancy, nothing that required hours of preparation. I'm not a great cook, he warned. I can barely boil water, Victoria countered. So this is already impressive. They ate and talked, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Victoria told him about her first job out of college, working in the mailroom of her family's company, and slowly learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. Lucas told her about his divorce, the painful process of rebuilding, the night Emily asked him why Mommy didn't love him anymore, and how that question had nearly broken him. She does love you, though, Victoria said quietly. Emily, the way she looks at you, the trust in her eyes when she talks about you, that's love, pure and uncomplicated. It's the best thing in my life, Lucas said. But it's also terrifying. Every decision I make affects her. Every relationship I pursue becomes part of her story too. That's a huge responsibility. I know. And that's one of the things I respect most about you. You don't compartmentalize your life. You don't pretend Emily isn't part of every equation. Victoria reached across the table, linking their fingers. I'm not asking you to choose between her and me. I'm asking to be part of both your lives, if you'll let me. The offer hung in the air, weighted with possibility and promise. Lucas looked at this woman who'd spent the day talking about giving up an empire, who'd sat on his floor listening to his daughter explain octopus facts, who was offering to step into the complicated reality of his life instead of demanding he fit into hers. I think I'm falling for you, he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Victoria's breath caught. Yeah? Yeah, and it terrifies me. Because I've only known you for 6 months, really known you for less than a week. And I'm sitting here thinking about futures and possibilities and all the ways this could change everything. I'm terrified too, Victoria admitted. I'm thinking about calling the Maxim board tomorrow and officially declining. I'm thinking about restructuring my entire life around the possibility of something real with you. I'm thinking about being part of Emily's life, about being someone's partner instead of just someone's boss. She squeezed his hand. And it's the most terrified I've been in 10 years, but it's also the most alive I've felt. Lucas stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her. It was soft and tentative at first, a question being asked and answered, then deeper as the weeks of tension and longing and careful distance finally dissolved. Victoria melted into him, her hands tangling in his hair, and Lucas felt like he was falling and flying simultaneously. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Victoria smiled. That was worth waiting for. Yeah, Lucas agreed, his voice rough. Yeah, it was. They spent the rest of the evening on his couch, talking quietly while Emily read in her room. Victoria told him about her fears, about the board's potential reaction to declining Singapore, about the shareholders who would question her judgment. Lucas told her about his own fears, about the gossip that would inevitably follow once their relationship became public, about protecting Emily from the scrutiny. At 10 o'clock, Victoria's phone buzzed with a message from her driver. She'd sent him away hours ago, insisting she'd find her own way home, but now reality was intruding on their bubble. I should go, she said reluctantly. It's late, and you have to get Emily to school in the morning. I know. Lucas walked her to the door, neither of them quite ready to let the evening end. Tomorrow? Victoria asked. Tomorrow. But, Victoria, about the Singapore decision, don't make the call yet. Take the full 4 days like we agreed. Make sure you're really certain. I'm already certain, she said, kissing him softly. But I'll wait until Friday. For you. So you can be sure, too. After she left, Lucas checked on Emily, finding her asleep with her octopus book open on her chest. He carefully extracted the book, turned off her light, and stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his daughter sleep. Everything was about to change. He could feel it like an approaching storm, inevitable, powerful, transformative. Victoria was going to decline the Singapore expansion. Their relationship would become real, public, scrutinized. Emily's life would shift to accommodate this new presence. The carefully ordered world Lucas had built was about to be rearranged, and for the first time since his divorce, Lucas wasn't afraid of the change. He was ready for it. Wednesday morning arrived with unexpected snow, the kind that transformed the city into something softer, quieter, momentarily gentler. Lucas stood at his kitchen window, watching the flakes fall, while Emily ate breakfast behind him, chattering about whether they'd have enough snow for a snowman by afternoon. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Board meeting at 9. They're pushing for an answer on Singapore. I'm holding firm until Friday, but the pressure is intense. Lucas typed back, You don't owe them an early answer. Take the time you need. I know what I want, Lucas. The waiting is just formality at this point. Then wait anyway. For both of us. At the office, the atmosphere felt charged with something Lucas couldn't quite identify. People clustered in small groups, conversations stopping abruptly when he passed. Marcus caught him by the elevator, his expression unusually serious. There's talk, Marcus said quietly, about you and Victoria. Lucas's stomach dropped. What kind of talk? Nothing concrete, just people have noticed things, the way she looks at you in meetings, the private lunches, the fact that you're suddenly being considered for SVP when you've only been here 6 months. Marcus held up his hands. I'm not judging, man. I'm just warning you. The rumor mill is starting to turn. We haven't done anything inappropriate, Lucas said, which was technically true even if it felt like a lie by omission. Doesn't matter. Perception is reality in corporate politics. Just be careful, okay? Victoria has enemies on the board, people who'd love an excuse to question her judgment. After Marcus left, Lucas sat at his desk staring at spreadsheets without seeing them. The gossip was starting before they'd even made anything official, before Victoria had made her decision. The scrutiny he'd feared was already beginning, and they hadn't even had a chance to build something real yet. His phone rang. Victoria's assistant. Mr. Grant, Ms. Hale would like to see you in her office, when you have a moment. I'll be right up. He found Victoria standing at her windows, her posture rigid with tension. She didn't turn when he entered. Close the door, she said. Lucas did, his heart pounding. What's wrong? James Rothman from Maxim called this morning. Apparently word is leaked about the Singapore expansion offer. It's all over the business news. Speculation about whether I'll take it, what it means for the company, whether I'm finally ready to go global in a meaningful way. She finally turned to face him, and her expression was strained. The board is in an uproar. Half of them are thrilled about the possibility. The other half is concerned about the risk, and all of them want an answer now, not Friday. What did you tell them? That they'll get an answer when I'm ready to give one. Victoria moved away from the window, pacing. But Lucas, the pressure is enormous. The stock price jumped 3% just on the speculation. Shareholders are calling. Major clients are asking what this means for their contracts. Everyone wants to know what Victoria Hale is going to do next. Lucas could see the weight of it crushing her, the empire she'd built becoming a cage of expectations. What do you want to do? I want to tell them all to back off and give me space to think, Victoria said, frustration bleeding into her voice. I want to make a decision based on what's right for me, not what makes shareholders happy or what looks good in the business press. She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. I want this to be simple. And it's not. Lucas crossed to her, gently pulling her hands away from her face. Nothing worth having is simple. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's supposed to be true. He held her gaze. Victoria, you know what you want. You told me yesterday. You told me last night. The only thing that's changed is the external pressure. Don't let that change what you know in your heart. What I know in my heart is terrifying, she whispered, because I'm sitting here wanting to call the board right now and decline Singapore. Not Friday. Now. I want to end the speculation and the pressure and make it clear that I'm choosing a different path. But that path is you, Lucas. Us. Something that barely exists yet. And what if I'm wrong? What if I blow up my career for something that doesn't survive the next 6 months? Then you'll still have built an incredible company. You'll still be one of the most successful CEOs in the country. You'll still have everything except that one expansion. But I'll have chosen wrong. Or you'll have chosen honestly, Lucas countered. Victoria, I can't tell you what to do. This has to be your decision. But I can tell you that running scared from the possibility of failure isn't the same as making a smart choice. It's just running. Victoria pulled away, resuming her pacing. Patricia wants to hold a special board meeting tomorrow. They want to vote on whether to accept the Maxim offer. They're trying to take the decision out of my hands. Can they do that? Technically, no. I still have majority control. But if the board votes to recommend the expansion and I decline anyway, it looks like I'm letting personal feelings override business judgment, which, let's be honest, is exactly what I'd be doing. Lucas felt anger flare in his chest. So they're trying to force your hand, to pressure you into making a decision that serves their interests instead of yours. Welcome to corporate leadership, Victoria said bitterly. Everything is politics and optics and managing stakeholder expectations. Even my personal life becomes a business consideration. Then maybe it's time to stop letting them control the narrative. Victoria stopped pacing. What do you mean? I mean you've spent 10 years playing by their rules, building what they expected, expanding how they wanted, being the CEO they needed you to be. Maybe it's time to remind them who actually runs this company. A spark of something, determination maybe, or defiance, flickered in Victoria's eyes. You're suggesting I call their bluff. I'm suggesting you make your decision on your timeline, for your reasons, and let the chips fall where they may. If the board doesn't like it, they can deal with it. You're Victoria Hale. You built this empire from almost nothing. You don't answer to them. They answer to you. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Then abruptly she laughed, a real genuine laugh that transformed her face. You know what? You're absolutely right. She pulled out her phone, her fingers moving decisively. I'm calling an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. I'm not waiting until Friday. I'm not letting them control this narrative any longer. Victoria, I know what I want, Lucas. I've known since yesterday, maybe longer. The only thing waiting accomplishes is giving them more time to pressure me, more time for speculation to build, more time for doubt to creep in. She met his eyes, her expression fierce. I'm declining the Singapore expansion, today, and I'm doing it on my terms. Lucas felt his heart hammering. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She moved closer, taking his hands. This morning, when I woke up, the first thing I thought about wasn't the expansion or the board or the stock price. It was you. It was Emily showing me her octopus book. It was the possibility of building something real instead of just building something bigger. That's what I want. That's what I'm choosing. The board is going to fight you. Let them fight. I've been fighting my whole life. But this time, I'm fighting for something that actually matters. The board meeting was scheduled for 2 o'clock. Lucas spent the intervening hours trying to focus on work, trying not to think about what was happening in that conference room, trying not to imagine all the ways this could explode. At 3:30, his phone rang. Victoria. "It's done," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I officially declined the Maxim expansion offer. The board is, well, they're not happy. Patricia is furious. 3 members threatened to resign. But it's done." Lucas closed his eyes, relief and terror washing over him in equal measure. "How do you feel?" "Terrified? Exhilarated? Like I just jumped off a cliff and I'm not sure if I'm falling or flying." She paused. "Can you come up here? I need to see you." He found her in her office, standing at those damn windows again, but this time her posture was different, looser, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "I did it," she said when he entered. "I actually did it." "How bad was it?" "Bad? Patricia called it the worst business decision I've ever made. Rothman accused me of letting personal considerations cloud my judgment. David Chen said I was throwing away the opportunity of a lifetime." Victoria turned to face him, and despite the stress evident in her features, she was smiling. "And I told them all that maybe for once, I was making a decision based on what would make me happy instead of what would make the company bigger, and that if they couldn't support that, they were welcome to leave." "Did any of them leave?" "Not yet. But the day's not over." She moved closer to him. "Lucas, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this just for you. I did it for me. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because I want a life that includes more than quarterly earnings reports. Because I finally realized that building a bigger empire won't fill the hole where my personal life should be." But I was part of the equation. You were the catalyst. The thing that made me realize what I was missing. The proof that connection and happiness and something real were actually possible for me. She took his hands. "But if this doesn't work out between us, I won't regret the decision. Because choosing to stay in New York, choosing to prioritize my personal life, choosing to finally stop running, that's what I needed, regardless of whether we end up together." Lucas pulled her into his arms, feeling the tremor in her body, the release of tension that came from finally making an impossible choice. "What happens now?" "Now I deal with the fallout, issue a statement to the press, calm down the shareholders, convince the board this wasn't temporary insanity." She pulled back to look at him. "And I figure out how to actually have a relationship with you while navigating all of this." "About that," Lucas said carefully, "Marcus told me this morning that people are starting to talk. About us. The rumors are already circulating." Victoria's expression tightened. "I expected that. But we haven't done anything inappropriate?" "We haven't. But perception matters. And with you just declining a major expansion, people are going to connect dots. They're going to assume personal feelings influenced your business decision." "They're not wrong," Victoria said bluntly. "Personal feelings did influence my decision. I'm not going to lie about that. But I'm also not going to apologize for it. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to think about how we handle this going forward, because the scrutiny is only going to get worse." Victoria was quiet for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You're right. We need a strategy. We need to—" She trailed off, then suddenly smiled. "We need to stop hiding." "What?" "Think about it. We've been trying to keep this quiet, to maintain professional boundaries, to avoid gossip. But the gossip is happening anyway. People are speculating, and by trying to hide, we're actually feeding the narrative that there's something inappropriate happening." Victoria's eyes brightened with determination. "What if we just owned it? What if we were honest about the fact that we're pursuing a relationship, but maintained absolute professionalism at work?" "You mean go public?" "Not exactly. I mean stop sneaking around, stop pretending. Be honest with HR, establish clear boundaries about work versus personal life, and let our actions speak for themselves." She was warming to the idea now, her CEO brain already strategizing. "I remove you from my direct reporting structure. Transfer you to a different department, same level, same pay, but reporting to Patricia or someone else. That way, there's no conflict of interest, no appearance of favoritism. And we're just two people who met at work and started dating, which isn't scandalous, it's normal. Lucas considered it. You'd really restructure the company to make this work? I just declined a multi-billion-dollar expansion to make this work, Victoria pointed out. Restructuring reporting lines is minor in comparison. What about Emily? We bring her into this, she becomes part of the public narrative too. We protect her, Victoria said firmly. We keep her out of the press. We maintain boundaries between our professional lives and our personal lives. We make it clear that she's off limits to speculation or gossip. But Lucas, we can't hide her existence. And I don't want to. I want to be part of your life. Both of your lives. If you'll let me. Lucas looked at this woman who'd just upended her entire professional trajectory, who was now proposing to restructure her company to make their relationship possible, who'd met his daughter once and was already talking about being part of both their lives. You're serious about this, he said. I've never been more serious about anything. Victoria moved closer, her expression intense. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. I know we're taking a massive risk. But Lucas, I spent 10 years being careful and measured and strategic, and it got me an empire and crushing loneliness. I don't want to be careful anymore. I want to be brave. Being brave doesn't mean being reckless. No, it means taking calculated risks on things that matter. And you matter. Emily matters. This possibility of building something real that matters more than any expansion ever could. Lucas kissed her then, pouring all his fear and hope and desperate wanting into it. When they pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Okay, he said, we do this. We're honest. We're strategic. We protect Emily, and we see where this goes. Yeah? Yeah. The press release went out that evening, carefully worded by Victoria's communications team. Victoria Hale had declined the Maxim expansion opportunity, choosing instead to focus on strengthening Hale Industries' existing markets and pursuing strategic growth closer to home. The statement emphasized long-term stability over rapid expansion, consolidated excellence over scattered reach. It said nothing about personal considerations or impossible choices or a billionaire CEO choosing happiness over empire. But the business press read between the lines anyway. By Thursday morning, the speculation was in full swing. Victoria's decision was analyzed from every angle: strategic wisdom or personal weakness, bold consolidation or missed opportunity. The stock price dipped 2%, then recovered. Shareholders demanded explanations. Competitors sensed opportunity. And through it all, Victoria held firm. Lucas watched her navigate the storm with a mixture of awe and terror. She was brilliant in the board meetings, defending her decision with data and strategy and long-term vision. She was patient with worried shareholders, explaining her reasoning without apologizing for her choice. She was unmovable when critics suggested she'd let emotions override logic. I made a business decision based on what's best for this company long-term, she told a particularly aggressive business journalist in an interview. Rapid expansion isn't always smart expansion. Sometimes the wisest choice is to consolidate what you have and build from a position of strength. By Friday afternoon, the worst of the storm had passed. The stock price had stabilized. The board, while not happy, had accepted her decision. The press had moved on to other stories. And Victoria sat in her office looking exhausted but somehow lighter than Lucas had ever seen her. It's done, she said when he arrived for their scheduled meeting. All of it. The expansion is officially declined. Your transfer to Patricia's department is finalized. The restructuring is complete. She smiled. We're officially just two people who work at the same company and happen to be dating. How does that feel? Terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Victoria stood, moving around her desk. I have something for you. She handed him an envelope. Inside was a formal offer letter, Senior Vice President of Strategic Analysis, reporting directly to Patricia Morrison, with a salary that made Lucas's eyes widen. This is independent of us, Victoria said firmly. Patricia and the board reviewed your performance, your contributions to the Maxim analysis, your overall value to the company. This promotion is based entirely on merit. I had zero input on the decision. Lucas stared at the letter, seeing his hard work validated, his talents recognized, his future secured in ways that had nothing to do with who he was dating. Thank you, he said quietly. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You earned this. Victoria moved closer. So what do you say? Are you ready to be officially dating the CEO while working in a completely different department and maintaining absolute professional boundaries? I say it sounds complicated and messy and potentially wonderful. Lucas pulled her close. I say yes. They stood like that for a long moment, the city spread out below them, the future uncertain but full of possibility. Then Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and smiled. Emily wants to know if we can go to the aquarium this weekend. Apparently she needs to see the octopuses in person to verify some facts from her books. Lucas laughed, warmth flooding his chest. You're texting with my daughter now? You gave me her grandmother's number so I could coordinate picking you up. Emily stole the phone and demanded my contact information. She's very persuasive for a 7-year-old. She gets that from me. I doubt that. Victoria's expression softened. She's wonderful, Lucas, and if this is going to work, if we're really doing this, I want to be part of her life too, not as a replacement for her mother, but as someone who cares about both of you, if that's okay. Lucas felt his throat tighten with emotion. More than okay. That weekend, they went to the aquarium. Emily dragged them from exhibit to exhibit, her enthusiasm infectious, her questions endless. Victoria listened patiently to every octopus fact, asked thoughtful questions, and didn't flinch when Emily grabbed her hand crossing between buildings. Lucas watched them together, his daughter and this woman who'd chosen connection over empire, and felt something settle in his chest. This was real. This was actually happening. The impossible thing they'd been circling for months had become tangible, concrete, worth the risk. Look, Daddy, Emily called from in front of the giant Pacific octopus tank. Victoria says when octopuses hold hands, it's called mating behavior. Are you and Victoria going to hold hands? Lucas felt heat rise in his face while Victoria laughed, the sound bright and unselfconscious. Yes, sweetheart, Victoria said, taking Lucas's hand and squeezing it. We're definitely going to hold hands. The months that followed weren't easy. There were awkward moments navigating work relationships now that everyone knew about them. There were shareholders who questioned Victoria's judgment. There were colleagues who assumed Lucas had gotten his promotion through favoritism, despite all evidence to the contrary. There were challenges balancing Lucas's responsibilities as a father with Victoria's demanding schedule. But there were also Saturday mornings where Victoria showed up at Lucas's apartment with bagels and spent hours reading with Emily. There were quiet evenings in Victoria's penthouse where they cooked dinner together and talked about everything except work. There were moments when Lucas watched Victoria explain compound interest to his 7-year-old daughter and felt his heart expand with something that felt remarkably like love. 6 months after Victoria declined the Singapore expansion, Hale Industries posted its strongest quarterly earnings in company history. The consolidation strategy she'd championed had paid off. The market she'd focused on had exceeded projections. The risk she'd taken had proven strategically sound. See? Victoria told her board during the celebration meeting. Sometimes choosing quality over quantity actually works. Patricia cornered Lucas after the meeting, her expression inscrutable. I owe you an apology, she said. When Victoria declined Singapore, I thought she'd lost her mind. Turns out, she'd found it. Lucas learned later that Victoria had nearly cried when Patricia told her the same thing privately. Nearly, but not quite. She was still Victoria Hale after all, still powerful, still controlled, still the CEO who commanded rooms and moved markets. But she was also the woman who showed up to Emily's school play and cheered louder than anyone, who learned to make dinosaur pancakes even though she burned the first 3 batches, who fell asleep on Lucas's couch after 16-hour workdays and looked young and vulnerable and heartbreakingly human. One evening, nearly a year after that first late-night conversation in Victoria's office, Lucas found her standing at the windows of her penthouse, watching the city lights the way she always did when she was thinking deeply about something. "What's on your mind?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was thinking about Daniel," Victoria said softly. "About what he'd think of all this. The choice I made. The life I'm building. And I think he'd be proud. Not because the company is successful, he always knew it would be, but because I finally stopped running, because I chose to actually live instead of just build." She turned in his arms to face him. "I think he'd like you, and he'd love Emily. I wish I could have met him. Me too. Victoria smiled, but it was touched with sadness. He used to tell me that success without happiness is just expensive loneliness. I never understood what he meant until I met you. Lucas kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. Just the one? All of them. Declining Singapore, restructuring the company, taking a chance on something uncertain and terrifying and real. He pulled her closer. Choosing us. Best decision I ever made, Victoria whispered. They stood there in the quiet of her penthouse, the city spread out below them like a promise. Two people who'd risked everything for the possibility of something real. Because in the end, that's what it came down to. Not power or money or empires built from ambition and loss. Not careers or reputations or what the business press thought about impossible choices. Just two people who'd been brave enough to admit what they wanted. Brave enough to risk what they'd built. Brave enough to choose love when logic suggested otherwise. Victoria Hale had spent 10 years building an empire, but she'd spent the last year building a life. And as she stood in Lucas's arms, watching the lights of a city that had witnessed her transformation from lonely CEO to woman willing to risk it all, she knew which one mattered more. Emily's voice drifted from the guest room where she was supposedly reading before bed. Victoria, can you come here? I have a question about whether octopuses dream. Victoria laughed, the sound full of joy and wonder and the kind of happiness that couldn't be measured in quarterly earnings or stock prices. Coming, she called back, then looked at Lucas with eyes that held everything they'd fought for, everything they'd risked, everything they'd won. You ready for octopus dream theory? Always, Lucas said, taking her hand. And together, they walked toward the sound of a 7-year-old's laughter, toward the messy and complicated and beautiful reality of the life they'd chosen, toward a future that looked nothing like the carefully planned empires either of them had imagined, but everything like the happiness they'd both desperately needed. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop building walls and start building bridges. Sometimes the strongest choice is admitting you need something beyond success. Sometimes the most powerful decision is choosing love over ambition, connection over empire, the uncertain possibility of happiness over the comfortable certainty of loneliness. Victoria Hale had learned that lesson the hard way. But standing in her penthouse with Lucas's hand in hers and Emily's questions about octopus dreams waiting to be answered, she knew without a doubt that it had been worth every impossible choice, every terrifying risk, every moment of uncertainty. She'd given up an empire, but she'd gained a life worth living, and that made her richer than any expansion ever could.